We are witnessing a proposal by Transport Scotland to remove very significant parts of the battlefield of Killiecrankie. We will walk you over the ground, which has been marked out by Transport Scotland, which will clearly demarcate the areas that will be removed and destroyed forever. So for future generations, we have a duty to protect this ground, to ensure they have the ability to walk over it as we can now, and to understand how the battle evolved and what their ancestors went through. So as we look back here across what was the right wing of the Scottish Government Army, right down from our position up to the road will be completely altered. The ground we're looking at the moment is as our ancestors would have seen it all those years ago. From once the A9 alterations are put in place, this will be completely altered and no longer available to understand. look up here on the ground, we can see a blue marker indicating the extent of the work to be undertaken by Transport Scotland. Looking behind me, you can see this ground here is the part of the stepped ground, which was the focus of the main fighting. So to our left here was Mackay's regiment. All across this ground here, the clan regiments led by the Camerons attacked Mackay's regiment, and this was the turning point of the battle. We will look into a little bit more of this later. So we're standing here right on one of the main steps that affected the outcome of the Battle of Killiecrankie. Behind us, where I'm looking towards, you can imagine yourself facing Levin's regiment, which had swung round in a quarter conversion, and they fired into this ground, mainly occupied by the Cameron regiment as they advanced towards the government line. Now I'm just going to walk up to the top here. If you turn around and swing the camera around, you can see there is an element of a step just on the tree line and near the red marker. Now as I walk up the step, I'm actually going up the step, and we can see behind me or to my right there is the Transport Scotland marker. This is the ground that will be occupied by the new carriageway, and as you can clearly see, it will remove this step. Now there is an argument this step was created in the creation of the first A9, I would seriously question that, because it was continuous for a long line. So for the battlefield interpretation, it is these steps, as we are informed from all the accounts at the time, were crucial to understanding the choreography of the battle. So the step behind me, looking into the trees there, was potentially the last step the Highlanders, the Camerons, advanced over before they confronted Mackay's regiment, who were in the field to our right down there. Just to put it in context, the battle, it is widely agreed, turned at this point. So the Camerons advanced here across this ground, the step behind me, advanced very aggressively, but at this point here they were hit by pretty effective fire from Levin's regiment. And in Cameron of Lochiel's own account, he talks about how important the understanding of his own men was, and he had previously gone round to each man in his regiment explaining what they needed to do. At this spot where we're now standing, nearly 100 to 120 Camerons were killed. Now, it is really quite spine-tingling for me to be standing on this ground and to know so many people died, but also to know that the Cameron clan still had the resolution and the ferocity to advance across the ground and decimate Mackay's regiment at the edge of this ridge. General Hugh Mackay had clearly given orders to his regiments to give their fire at 100 paces. As the enemy reached 100 paces, they were ordered to fire. If we walk down this ridge here, you can imagine the ground I'm walking over now was covered by the Cameron regiment, where as I go past this tree, stepping down, if you look down here you can see the red mark. This will all be destroyed by the construction of the A9. Then moving down here, at this point, they not only withstood the fire of Levin's regiment behind Camera, but also came into the fire from Mackay's regiment, who occupied the position on the step there. This was of crucial importance. The Highlanders had the tenacity, having lost 100 of their number, to still advance and obliterate Mackay's regiment in hand-to-hand fighting. So just out of interest, I'm now going to pace from the step ground where I'm standing towards where Mackay's regiment was. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're now going down a steep drop from a step. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67. Now if you look, so this is 70 yards. If you had come here with a regiment and were facing a Highland army on the hills behind us, the question is, would you have positioned your line on the top of this ridge or at the bottom? I, for one, would have preferred to position at the top, because the top would give you the best chance of defending yourself with some flat ground in front of you. And we can see this step to our left. I believe this formed the main killing ground for the Battle of Killiecrankie. And it's on this ground that many men lost their lives, both on the government side. Mackay's regiment was completely decimated, but also in the Cameron regiment and amongst other Highlanders. This was the real killing ground of the battlefield of Killiecrankie. If we look behind us, just through the trees there, you can see the present Urad house. Now we know from General Hugh Mackay's account that he positioned himself and his line with Urrod House and the associated gardens behind him. So it's quite easy to look, and if we extend that line towards the knoll which formed his far left flank, the line is pretty much where we're standing, and we can certainly interpret it 20 yards or 30 yards here or there, but if you look at this step, to push yourself down another 30 or 40 yards I think would make it illogical to stand there, and would also take the government line out of a straight line. And we know Hugh Mackay was obsessed with keeping his lines straight. We know from the archaeological evidence and from the fall of musket balls that this area was unquestionably very central to the battle. Large numbers of musket balls are found here. There is a question as to where those musket balls may have come from. Some of them almost undoubtedly came from Levin's regiment over towards Urrod House. Some of them probably came from Mackay's regiment, and this is all open to interpretation, but we are definitely standing about 80 paces to 90 paces from the current A9. So we could argue very strongly that the government line and the killing fields would indicate that the battle really took place on this steppe ground. Okay, just to give you an idea, I'm now going to walk following the line that Transport Scotland have put in the ground that indicates the extent of the A9 conversion. And you can see that this red marker is right on the edge of the critical step in the ground. So the camera will remain below me. You can see that it is significant drop in ground, potentially very significant in the battle. You can see another marker here, a big red mark. So here again we have another marker marking the edge of the work that will be carried out on the proposed A9 carriageway. Again, if you look down behind me, you can see it's going to completely take out this critical stepped ground. So looking behind me, you can see the red markers put in by Transport Scotland, indicating ground that will be removed or disturbed. As I move down closer towards the government line, there are further red markers on the ground. Exactly what these signify, we're not sure, but again, this ground here presumably will be disturbed. This ground is quite possibly the ground occupied by Levin's regiment, who had wheeled themselves round to fire at the Camerons. Again, if you look behind me, up to where we've previously walked, you can see the stepped ground which was advanced over by the Cameron regiment. Okay, this battle is famously called La Rinruri. Rinruri is the name, the Highland name for the battlefield. Where I'm standing now marks the beginning of the flat sloped field. Run describes a flat piece of ground. This formed the centre of the battle. So Rinruri is absolutely crucial. This is where Hugh Mackay, down on our right, would have stood with his cavalry in front of Urrod House. And again here you can see the mark, the red mark put in by Transport Scotland, indicates the line they're taking as following this 19th century wall from the walled garden. All this ground behind me will be disturbed or taken up by the carriageway. Very clearly from here.
It's interesting, isn't it?
We're standing at the edge of the 19th century walled garden, and I think it's interesting, we've walked on pretty much the original topography of Runruri, the flat field. If you look down towards the monument, you can see in the distance through the gap in the trees how far the visibility would have been when there were no trees. And there is an argument to say that the government left wing may well have been seriously intimidated by the loss of Mackay's regiment, which would have been clearly visible to them as they looked towards their right. We're now standing with my back towards the government left wing, and behind me here, behind the post, you can see another red marker indicating this ground will be completely taken away by A9 construction. As we move down this slope, again looking behind, you can see the memorial cairn quite clearly. Excuse me, another red marker, and there is a blue marker here somewhere. But this ground to our right here is, the proposal is to put compensatory tree plantation here. I would argue that this is further obliterating ability of people to walk the battlefield and interpret what's happened in this area. Just to put this battle into context, this was the first battle of a series of battles that culminated at the Battle of Culloden in 1746. Now we know there's been a lot of interest in the Culloden battlefield, which required the removal of trees. Here, looking over to my left here, they're proposing to plant trees in the heart of the battlefield. I would argue that this is really counterproductive and will be destructive of the battle and people's ability to enjoy and interpret it. Okay, if you look over to my right, you can see the knoll of ground with a house on top of it. Now we know from Hugh Mackay's own account that the front of this knoll formed the left anchor for his line. His line, therefore, looking from here, extended from the front of that knoll, probably close to the tree line, all the way across, running down to the direction I'm pointing. You can see Urad, the present Urad house. We know from General Hugh Mackay's account that he positioned himself with Urad house, a gentleman's house, behind him. Now this pretty accurately positions the line of the government army. So the government army was very close to the existing A9. Any removal of this ground will significantly deteriorate the battlefield and the ability to interpret it in the future. If you are as appalled as we are about this proposed desecration, then we would ask you to lobby your MSP, write to the First Minister of Scotland. Please remember, the Scottish Government has the power to alter their decision. The Scottish Government has the option and the ability to change this desecration of the battlefield, and we would ask you, wherever you are, whether you're in Scotland or overseas, to please do whatever you can to help us in this campaign to preserve the ground.